Hey everyone, Chip LaFleur here and Jason Brower.
How's it going, everybody?
We're just about to get started here. We got a couple more people showing up, so we'll give them another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll dive right in. All right, so we're going to get started now. Chip LaFleur, Jason Brower here. We're going to talk about lead nurturing and qualifying, making ROI the name of the game. Just going to kind of dive right in here. So we're going to talk about lead nurturing tactics, how we can use them. We're going to talk about nurturing strategies and how to actually put those into place. We're going to spend a little time talking about lead qualification. So if you're doing a good job generating leads, then you should have a whole lot of signal to noise. So how do you focus your time on the ones that matter the most? We're going to talk a little bit about digital platforms, what makes the most sense there. Then we're going to talk about some best practices, how to make some positive changes in your marketing funnel. And then we'll do some Q&A as it comes up. So we covered this the last time. This is kind of big picture marketing funnel. And so you think of at the far left side is kind of pre-awareness, people who don't know who you are and they don't know they need your service. We talked a little bit about lead generation, and that I think is what gets a lot of the focus when you talk to a marketing agency or talk to a marketing team. How many leads did you generate? We like to also look at how many things did you sell, how many clients did you sign, things like that. And so what we're going to do next in this one is talk a little bit more about these two stages here in the funnel. So interest and consideration and intent. So what are the things that we can utilize at that stage? And then how do we push people into that sales and purchase contract, hiring process, things like that.
So just wanted to go over a couple vocabulary words that we'll cover throughout the podcast or throughout the webinar today. Lead nurturing. If you sign up for the webinar, you probably know what lead nurturing is because we push that pretty hard. But moving people from that general awareness, just getting to know your brand, into that purchase and making a commitment stage. And then lead qualification. Deciding on which prospects or which leads are best based on their engagement with your brand are more likely to purchase or are best to kind of chase down for your salespeople. Marketing ROI, so measuring how much spend you have from marketing and then how much you gain from that as well. And then collateral pieces, having things that people can interact with that will kind of move them down that funnel.
So when we think of this, we try to think of things from a very holistic perspective, right? So we talk about lead generation. It gets people into that funnel. So what was the tool that we used to get them there? We want to have an understanding of that. We talked about that in our last webinar. So we want to take the information that we get and the information that we use to get someone interested in our product or our services, and then really continue that narrative. So each of these pieces needs to work together. And it's helpful from a strategic perspective to kind of take a step back and look at all of those pieces. So Jason talked about collateral. You know, what did they interface with at the beginning? And then do they really have a consistency of message, of look and feel as they go throughout that process? So like we said, you know, there's a lot of focus on lead generation, and it's obviously a very important part because if you don't do the generation, you can't do the nurturing. But sometimes that nurturing process can take a lot longer than we intuitively feel like it can. So we measure this for our clients, we measure this for ourselves as well. And we find for ourselves, it can be 6 months to a year before someone chooses to reach out and initiate an actual conversation about potentially hiring us. We find for our clients, depending on what the vertical is, it can vary from a few days to even a few years. And so we want to follow best practices there, but we want to make sure that we stay relevant, you know, as we go throughout that entire process. So what we want to do is foster that interest, that consideration, and intent. And so we're going to talk next about some of the specific tools that we can use to do that. But it's helpful here to put yourself in the shoes of your buyer or your potential client and start asking yourselves the question. So if I was in that situation, what would make me interested in hiring you specifically? what brought me to the table to even be thinking about this? What's the life experience, or what's the situational, what is the situation of the individual who's thinking about doing this thing? And then as they're considering what they're doing, how do they go about learning more about you? How do they go about learning more about the industry? What tools are they using to kind of do their research and dig in if it's a product or service that you're talking about that fits that area? And then when they hit that intent stage, how do we make sure that we are the entity that's there when they're ready to move forward? So you think of like making a purchase, through Amazon or through a retailer, for just as an example. Person may do their research because they developed an interest. They may have developed an interest because they saw an ad. They're thinking about a couple of different products in that family, maybe you, maybe some of your competitors. And then they reach a point in time where they say, I'm ready to go and I'm ready to make this purchase. So if you're competing in what I would call a more equal playing field in terms of the product, then how do you make yourself be the one who's there to make that purchase? And so again, when we think about Amazon makes it so easy. They're going to send you an email to say, hey, we know you were looking at this. They're going to make sure that the things that you recently looked at are going to show up on that homepage. So when you're ready to go, they understand your intent and they're going to help you execute on that.
Yeah, so one of those tactics that you can use to kind of move those people along is remarketing ads. So these are ads, like Chip was saying, that Amazon uses, taking specific actions, whether it be on your website or your social media pages, or pretty much any interaction that they have with your brand, and remarketing to those people. So for example, through Facebook ads, taking anybody that has engaged with the video that you posted on your profile, or taking anybody that has liked one of your posts, taking those people and putting them into a custom audience, and then serving those people specific interest-based ads. So things that move them from just kind of that general awareness, maybe it's a general awareness video that they watched, and then moving them towards getting more information about your brand, and then keep doing that as you move forward. So you can do that on social media. You can do that through programmatic ads, Google display ads, and you can take that from interacting with your social, or visiting certain pages on your website, or even a customer list that you have. If you have a large CRM system with lots of contacts, you can take those people and put them into these different platforms and serve ads to those specific people.
And I would say, we want to touch on at least some platforms too as we go through this process. What do we use? What do we find effective? I'd say there's a pretty broad spectrum of tools here that are effective. So Jason mentioned social media. So LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram are pretty clear choices here. So you could do retargeting through those platforms. You can also do retargeting through Google Ads, through display, so that, you follow those people around. Then we also have some kind of higher budget tools and tactics that we can use there too. So we use Basis by Centro on the programmatic side. And so Jason will talk next a little bit about what programmatic is. But when you think of the retargeting campaign, it's not necessarily that you want to retarget every single individual who comes onto your site. You may still have some other parameters there. And so Jason could talk about that kind of as we look at our next slide. So the programmatic and the retargeting kind of work hand in hand. The challenge there is you need enough budget to support the platform or run through an agency who has a platform like that, because they're usually going to have some minimums that you need to hit. If you don't hit that, you're not going to have access.
Right. So yeah, along that basis is talking more about programmatic advertising, and you can get very targeted with that audience targeting. The difference between programmatic and regular display ads is one, you're bidding on the website that these people are going to. Programmatic advertising, you're able to reach the individuals, and the more of the online behavior, individual demographics, geography that they're visiting. But kind of the main benefit of using programmatic advertising is that online behavior. So being able to reach people, not specifically on a site that you're targeting, but specifically what they're looking at as they go through their online search.
So then that gives us some of the paid tactics that we can use to nurture and continue that conversation. So we've already generated the lead. How do we nurture them? And there's some gray area there, because with retargeting, we can retarget people who have self-identified. We can also retarget people who haven't. So that gets in this gray area of, are they a lead yet or not? And I would argue that they are, even if you don't know who they are. So they're interested in you. They've expressed that. So what we want to keep doing then is keep that messaging in front of them, keep your targeting, tight to the audience that you want to hit, but then try to move them forward to the next stage, which is really self-identification. Getting someone to commit to something where they give you their contact information, whether it's an email or phone number, but something that allows you to identify them. Because then once we identify them, we can do a lot of other things. We'll touch on that on the automation side. But one of the tools and one of the tactics that we can use to try to get them to self-identify is what we have laid out here. So white papers, infographics, thought leadership, email newsletters. We can't send an email newsletter unless we know their email, of course. And so what we'll often do is we'll use some of these kind of thought leadership pieces behind like a soft paywall, where someone has to fill out their contact information on a form, and that allows us to do a couple of different things. So again, we take that perspective of the user, right? Of the end user, customer, client. What do they want? What do they want to know? So earlier stages, they're doing research about the whole thing, right? The subject. So can we provide them with a really condensed version that helps them get to the answers that they want and helps them see that, it's less important at this stage, but we want them to start seeing you as that thought leader. So we create white papers and infographics, content on the site that's going to engage with people. And here, ideally, we want them to start to think about self-identifying. So we want to understand who they are as quickly as possible, but sometimes it takes building up that trust for a little bit. These tools allow us to do that. So white papers and infographics are a little bit heavier lift in terms of creation. They both need some content development, and they need a little bit of design as well. The thought leadership articles, those are the things that are kind of pre-self-identification that are going to give people an opportunity to kind of sample your thought leadership without having to make a commitment. So sometimes it'll take a few of those to get through to the others. And then once we have them self-identified in our systems, we want to be tracking their use. So this is where we start to make a switch from like Google Analytics, which is more of a macro view. We always pay attention to that, but now we want to start switching over to like the micro view, user by user. What are the things that they're actually interfacing with? And we'll circle back on that when we talk about lead scoring and identifying who kind of who justifies the most of our time spending with them. So then we get them in the newsletter, things like that, measure how much they're interfacing with us. Now we've got a direct line where we can speak to them without continuing to spend the money on the retargeting and things like that, or we're only doing that where it makes sense.
Yeah, so as we move into automation, if you have any questions about anything that we've covered so far, make sure to drop it in the chat. We'll cover those at the end. So yeah, as Chip was saying, using those thought leadership pieces or infographics or white papers, once you have their information, you don't want the interaction to stop there. And one thing that we see a lot of is with small teams and things like that, it's hard to follow up with every single lead that comes in. So being able to use automation to take kind of that next step. And kind of the example here is somebody fills out the form, they download the ebook, they get the ebook, but then you don't want the interaction to stop there. So then you put them into this About Us campaign. So maybe there's 3 to 5 emails that they'll get over a period of time, and kind of just gets them, one, they get to see your name, see your brand multiple times over that period, but also learning more information about you. So each email will have a different topic. Maybe it's something about your team. Maybe it's about your community outreach that you have going on. Maybe it's a new product, things like that. So moving them through that funnel, through automation, after they take that next step of giving you their contact info.
And there's a lot of scalability kind of in that stage too, right? So you create that kind of 3 to 5 email drip campaign. You can use that for an ebook download. You can use it for a white paper download. There, you still want to utilize some sort of user tracking, because you don't want the person who downloaded the white paper to come back and download an ebook and then get the About Us campaign again. So you want to track by user, so it's only firing once. But you can also use that, post trade show, post conference. So you start meeting people and they give you an okay to start sending them something. You create those assets once and then you reuse them in as many places as you can. And then Jason will talk here a little bit about customizing email templates. So you create a template. How can you reuse that in as many places as possible?
Yeah, so using customized email templates is a great way to kind of help out your sales folks or whoever's kind of reaching out to these leads kind of more quickly, reach out to them, but also being able to make it personable. I know we all get those standard emails of, hey, this person kind of emails, but being able to customize it to kind of information that you've received so far, or maybe it's just a tidbit that you've gotten through your interaction with them. So being able to use customized emails, we use a platform called SharpSpring that gives us the ability to take any email and customize it with any of that information that we've received through form fills. So name, email, job title, company names, but then also going in and adding just little tidbits of maybe you talked to somebody and they were going on a trip, so you had to follow up with them after a trip. Being able to add in, hey, how was your trip to Puerto Rico, and just adding those little tidbits in makes it more personable than just kind of your standard one-off emails.
Just really kind of a hybridization of automation, right? So in the example that Jason's talking about here, you've got an automated email, but you also can have and take that opportunity to jump in there and put some of those details in that makes it more personable. Obviously, in the real email, you keep the same color on the text and things like that, but we want everybody to be able to see kind of what we're calling out there.
Yeah, so let's just give that example of, taking that standard email that you have for when somebody fills out a form or any outreach that you have, and adding that little customability to that for some personalization.
So as we're going through that, we want to spend just a little bit of time kind of talking about video content as well. We have found that, utilizing video content can really push people into a willingness to open an email and to engage with it. So I think the stat remains that it's including like a video thumbnail increases your click-through rate by, I think, about 400%. So, I think the more traditional thinking is that video is very expensive, and it certainly can be, but it doesn't have to be. We've seen effective marketing campaigns and utilize some things involving just a phone. So if you have an iPhone or an Android, and you can send a really customized video where you're talking to your client or your potential client, potential customer. And again, it's going to vary by industry, right? You're not going to send a video to your potential customers that are looking to buy a plug off of Amazon. But if you're a law firm and there's an intake team and there's a case that you really want to bring in, even just a cell phone video to say, hey, we want to introduce ourselves, we want you to know who we are. There's this big gap between that and a fully professionally produced video. And both of those have a place in a lot of campaigns. And so again, we want to look at heavy lift versus light lift, and then the effectiveness of those things. So you might invest something in a professionally produced video. You might put a lot into that because you're going to use it across multiple campaigns, or you're going to use it for the next couple of years. But you can also produce something that's very low budget, that doesn't require really the production value of something like that to do a specific outreach. Somebody doesn't expect you to look perfect like you're in a studio when you send an email with a video link that says, we just want to introduce ourselves. It was great to meet you, or thanks for signing up for something. So there's a place for all of those things. And, we talk to a lot of video production houses, and they would agree with me that you can make 80 to 90% of the video content that you need to move the sales cycle along in-house. You can buy a little bit of equipment to be able to do that yourself. If you want something that's going to be used again and again, sure, bring in a videographer, producer, and create something like that. But for a lot of your day-to-day, just create that as a touch point, include it in your system and in your processes, because you're going to find a greater engagement. People still want to have that personal feel and that engagement person to person.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about personalization, and any touch point that you can have that kind of adds that little bit of your own feel, your own kind of brand, so kind of people see that more. Yeah, whether it be a cell phone video from your CEO to a new prospect, or customized emails, any way you can add that little one extra touch always helps out moving people through that funnel. So we'll talk a little bit more about lead follow-up here. Like I said before, we use a platform called SharpSpring, and one aspect that they have is life of the lead. So you'll see it here. Being able to kind of see those touch points in a view like this is great for kind of lead follow-up, and being able to see not only what form they filled out to get that thought leadership piece, but then after that, being able to see what websites or what pages on your website they went to, or other ways that they interact with your what videos they watch. So when you get to that follow-up, maybe it's a personalized email, you can kind of talk to all those points, whether it be talking about a page that they visited, maybe they stopped by at one of a particular product page. Being able to call that out when you follow up is a great way to use automation.
And so, we were talking about these different tactics, right? White papers, infographics, thought leadership pieces, video. When you look at a view like this, and this is just obviously a screenshot of that, when you look at a view like this, a little clipboard is when somebody filled out a form, the little web image is somebody visiting your site, the email someone clicking, and then this is what they clicked on. Video views are going to show up here. Downloads of collateral assets are going to show up here. And then all of these things are going to inform that lead score, which you want to track one way or another. So SharpSpring does a really nice job of doing that. Jason will talk about that here in a couple of slides, but you really start to understand the value of each of those things. So a couple of weeks ago, we had a roundtable discussion with a couple of other agencies that we see eye to eye with, and that, just folks that we like, and we're all in the same industry. So we thought, well, let's just all improve the way that we approach this. And one of the topics for discussion there was attribution. And so when we talk to our clients, they want to know, what do you attribute this new client to? What do you attribute the sale to? And that answer is always more complex. But being able to have a view like this in a platform like SharpSpring or HubSpot, Pardot, Infusionsoft, there are a lot of them out there. I think the best value is SharpSpring right now, but there are a ton of different tools to get to this point. Being able to look at that life of the lead helps our clients, I think, understand that the attribution model can't just be first touch or last touch. It has to be what was involved in that process. And so we've had an example of that ourselves, and I'll keep this brief, but we started doing a podcast for the legal industry, which we do a lot of work in. And I thought it wasn't going to be worth doing for quite a while. Steven on our team wanted to do it. And so we said, let's give it a try. And our listenership was never that high. I mean, it still is not super high. But what we found was that most of our clients who then come in and most of our potential clients that then come in and choose to hire us have stopped in and at least listened to that podcast once or more than once. And so if we didn't have this life of the lead, if we didn't have this view, we would not have known that that was a common kind of stopping point, because I don't really care nearly as much about the volume of people who are listening to that or who are engaging with it, as I do knowing that this is helping move people down our own funnel, down our own pipeline. And so we still do it. We promote it a little bit, but mostly, we know that people are going to go through that stage. And so you can really start to build some measurements of your tactical approach and the value of each of those tactics by looking at that life of the lead. Do the people who choose to hire you or choose to buy from you go through these gates and go through these stages? If they do, then you know that you're doing something right. If there's an asset that nobody interacts with, then you stop using it. Don't make another one just like it. Do something different.
Yep. So before we get into lead qualification, one more aspect of utilizing a automation platform is the ability to get custom notifications for really any user behavior that happens with your brand. So being able to get a notification to your salespeople or to some type of follow-up team whenever a form fill comes in, and then once you have their info, you can set it up for really anything that happens. So maybe you're chasing a lead and you haven't heard back from them for a while, but then you get a custom notification that they visited a certain page on your website. Then you can reach out to them almost immediately and reach out. One thing that we see with lead follow-up is the sooner you can reach out to somebody, the better. There's a very quick drop-off of people kind of interacting with you or being willing to take that next step if they don't hear from you for a day or two or things like that. So any way that you can shorten that gap of interaction is better.
Even minutes count, right? So I mean, like if you see someone popped onto your site and you call them a few minutes later, you know that you're top of mind. They're thinking about your product, your service. That's the time to talk to them.
Yeah, so we'll finish up here. We got a few minutes left. We'll talk about lead qualification. So one way that you can utilize lead qualification is kind of increase that ROI that you get from your leads. Not every lead that comes in, not every person that fills out the form, that downloads an ebook is going to be a qualified lead. So figuring out ways to reach out to the right people at the right times is kind of the main reason to use lead qualification. Being able to reach out to the right people and knowing kind of who is where in that marketing funnel. So one thing that we use, this is also through the automation platform SharpSpring, is lead scoring. So any engagement or any information that we receive from them from a lead increases or decreases their lead score. So then if you get to a certain lead score, you can set up a custom notification to your salesperson. Hey, this person has gotten to 100 lead score, things like that. So you can customize this to kind of your industry or your brand as a whole. So if you feel like somebody that watches a video on your website may be more apt to be a qualified lead than maybe visits a certain page, you'll have those numbers adjusted to your brand in particular.
Yeah, so we look at fit and we look at engagement. So like engagement is really on the user side. So what does the user do? How do they interface with you? Do they open emails? Do they click on pages? Do they visit important pages on your site? All of those things can be defined. The fit can happen kind of in both directions. So it may come from a client filling out a form and giving you this information. But if you have an active sales team, then that sales team may be looking at the people who have filled out a form, doing a little research behind them and saying, if we're trying to sell widgets to a widget making company, you may have 10 people who downloaded an ebook or who filled out a form, but of those, only 5 of them actually are widget making companies. So they can manually enter that information, and if it's in the system, it's going to increase their score. So now we're starting to understand, not only is this a potentially good customer because they are in the industry that we're targeting, they would be a potential buyer. Also, how are they interfacing with the things that we're sending? So do they watch a video? Are they opening emails? They're downloading stuff. So that's going to identify someone who's more ready to purchase, so we can measure some intent. On the other side, we know who it is. So we can fill that out. We can ask them to fill them out. We can build on that in both directions.
Yeah, and this kind of shows that view in Sharp Spring. So being able to see the lead score to those particular people instead of, yeah, so this gets to that individual focused kind of lead nurturing portion of it is being able to put the numbers to the people. You have the names, you have their contact info, and yeah, moving them along.
And again, that comes down to that prioritization, right? So Jason talked a little bit about that, but if you have 1,000 leads in your system and you have time to talk to 100 of them in a given week, or let's say you have 10,000, we've got tens of thousands of people in our database. We don't have time to speak to every single one of those if we can only reach 10 or 100 a week. We need to prioritize the ones that make the most sense. And so we use a combination of things on the automation side as well as on the manual effort side to make sure that we're prioritizing that appropriately. So, when we talk about every interaction being an opportunity to nurture and to move them further down the funnel, we want to utilize both of those tools, right? So automate what we can where it's impactful and where it's appropriate for that user, which we need to understand a little bit about in order to build that automation. And then use manual actions such as doing some research on your prospects, filling out some of their data in your system, Salesforce, SharpSpring, or something else, so that those communications keep helping them kind of make progress. So stay top of mind, show that you're a thought leader, help them understand that you are the correct entity to make that purchase or make that hiring decision through.
Perfect. So that's pretty much all we had to cover today. Hopefully you got some tactic that you can take away from this. If you have any questions, we'll take them now. Feel free to put them in the chat. We did have a couple come in. One that we got is, we do a lot of events. What are some ways to help lead nurturing post-event? Yeah,
so I think there's quite a few tactics there that make some sense. So again, on the manual and automated side, if we're going on the automated side, you're at an event. A lot of events are going to have badge scanners, so you're going to get that output of who stopped by your booth, who showed some interest in you. We could take that, export that, push that into a CRM or an automation platform like SharpSpring, or Pardot or Infusionsoft or HubSpot, and then build out follow-up communications. And the great thing about that is the scalability there. So we know that the people on that list have been to the show. We know that they expressed some interest in your brand. And so we could speak very directly to that, and it could scale up to tens or hundreds or thousands of people very quickly. On the more manual side, capture people's business cards. And there are ways you can use a system like Mechanical Turks to scan those in and type those in into a spreadsheet. And then again, build out that automation.
All right, we got one question left. I work in B2B industry. How would lead scoring work for me? Is there an out of the box option?
Yeah, so there are quite a few. HubSpot, I think, is kind of the most well-known. And they're all going to allow for a lot of room for customization, but most of them are going to come with a basic version in place. And if you're starting with nothing and you have a basic version of fit and engagement scores, then it's probably a good starting point. You can tweak those things as you utilize it, and as you start to see how that fits better, then you can go from there. So the answer is yes. So SharpSpring has out of the box. You turn it on and it's running. HubSpot, I think, does as well. Some of the higher end, more expensive ones do not have it out of the box because the assumption is that you're going to have to go in and build that. And then it looks like we had a question too. Will we make this available? Yes, we will make this available. We'll push it out to anybody who wants to get it. You can always reach out to us and get it. I think we're going to push it out via email as well. I'm sure we'll post it to social media too. So we'll make sure everyone has access to it. So we are pretty well out of overtime. So I apologize for eating up an extra 6 minutes of your life, but we appreciate you spending time with us. Appreciate you, Jason, taking the time to work on this together and go through it together. So until next time we'll have to dive into some of the other tactics. Maybe we'll do a deeper dive into some of the specific tactics, and we'll go from there. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, guys.